Welcome to Old Ass Movie Reviews. Today we are doing a special review. It's not old, and it's kind of out of our realm. It's Hands of Stone 2016. This movie was chosen by my good friend Holly Sloan, who is joining us for our special edition here. Hey, Holly.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Great. Hey, thanks for being here. I just want to know, why a boxing movie?
Well, okay, when I was a little girl, my dad, we didn't get to do a whole lot together because he was a professional athlete and a coach growing up. So we didn't have a whole lot of time during, season and stuff like that. But when I was about 7, I would say, my dad took me to see Rocky. And I was riveted. And there were so many things about it that, first of all, I kind of identified him in a way with my father, growing up, odds against them, people not believing you could do this. And then I come from a very tall family, and I was not. And, I'm like 5'4", I said in the 80s I was 5'8" with the hair, but, uh, but, so I always had to be extra tough or competitive or something just to fit in or to be recognized. And the thing, also when Rocky came out, that was also sort of during the time when Muhammad Ali, obviously, you had the Cassius Clay era to, Muhammad Ali, and heavyweight boxing was the big thing. And first of all, I was fascinated by Muhammad Ali. I didn't know about the Cassius Clay thing because I was too little to understand everything. But I thought, wow, he's so interesting and funny, and just the way he just dominated everything he did. I didn't care. I mean, he didn't care to embarrass you. He just and I thought that was it was so interesting. And as I got older, I started to see movies about sports. And I started to realize, boxing has probably, next to baseball, the richest history to me, I think. You go all the way, back to Max Schmeling, in The Great White Hope, but, that was based on, it's just such an interesting sport, and it still is. It doesn't quite have it's well with the new fighters today. They're a little more outspoken, but it's a great sport. It's not the violent aspect of it, but the politics, the characters, and they were characters, and their stories of what were brought into it. It wasn't just boxing. There was always an element, whether it be like, the underworld, whether it be the politics that were involved. And I never had a grasp on it, but it certainly, people say, oh, now politics are involved in sports. They've been around. I mean, it's
Right.
been in sport, even beyond what boxing was. But I was just fascinated by the sport history. And so I've always been interested in boxing movies, but with Rocky in particular, what it was for me though was the training scenes and the music.
Yeah.
And one of the first albums that I ever bought was the Rocky soundtrack.
Oh my, look at that. Awesome.
I bought this at the Deerfield Mall, and this, and actually, if you look on the back, well, it says Holly's 7 pairs, but I think it was Holly's 7 years.
7 years, 7 pairs. 7
Yeah.
pairs, years, it's okay.
My handwriting left a lot to be desired. But no, that's how I became so interested in sports movies. But Hoosiers, obviously, we lived that. I mean, even in the 80s, we were living that.
Right.
In our town, we went through that and identified with people. But growing up in a sports family, I think that also, made me just, biopics too. I mean, that's really the thing. A biopic, if it's about sports or rock and roll, I'm going to be in on it because
Right.
I just, it's just so much fun, and the stories, and they're risky too, because you have a big responsibility to tell it, but you have to be true to this, the story itself. A lot goes into a biopic. And then that's kind of why I like this particular movie. I know everyone was expecting I was going to pick Rocky. That's too easy.
I was really looking forward. It's like, oh, we didn't watch Rocky. Oh, what?
I think the first thing I texted to Scott was Hoosiers.
That's exactly what David said. Hoosiers? I said, yeah, hey, Hoosiers good.
Yeah. No, there's so many great boxing movies,
Yes.
I mean, you got The Champ, Goldie and the Boxer, Ali was great, The Greatest. And one that I love was $1 Million Baby.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot about that.
I've heard really good things about it. I haven't seen it.
Yeah, that was a movie that I wish, if I were just a good enough actress, I would have loved to have played that part.
It's such a heartbreaking movie. It
is.
Yeah.
And just the effort. I think when you go into a sports movie as an actor, I mean, if you're not an athlete, I appreciate so much the transformation that they go through. And and I always look for things like that. I wanted to watch Hilary Swank train, Will Smith, all these people, and same with Hands of Stone, because I just who do you have to play these actors, these two athletes? I always find that very interesting. Who are you going to choose? Is it a good choice? And I realize that there aren't many movies about, certainly I can't think of any biopics really about basketball, and that's because there are no actors that are 7 feet tall. You know what I mean? That's very hard to do. You know what I mean? Yeah, and I've always
web story.
Yeah, exactly. The only thing that I could ever come up with was Jim Caviezel to play John Stockton, who played for my dad, because they look so much alike. And I understand that they actually did play basketball against each other. They're both from Washington State.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I always wanted to see Clint Eastwood play my father at his older years. Every movie I ever watched, and as they aged kind of at the same time, I'm like, God, he does have that thing, like what my father had. So, I always would have loved to have seen something like that. But outside of that, like Eddie, that was awesome. Because but you can't find players to play somebody, actors to find players or athletes.
Right. Well, that's one of the things about this movie that I thought they really nailed was the casting. The actor for Sugar Ray and Duran, they both had the look.
It's Usher.
It was perfect. It was perfect.
I didn't realize it was Usher.
Yeah. He looked great, didn't he?
What?
Yeah, I was looking through the IMDb and I'm like, Usher. And I read his name like 3 times before it dawned on me. I was like, holy crap, that's the singer.
Yeah.
I'll be damned. Yeah, he was great.
He was a really good actor. For what small part he did really well.
Yeah, and I think what's really interesting, is making that choice is, well, first of all, Edgar Ramirez is 5'10", and Roberto Duran was 5'7", and Usher is 5'7", and Sugar Ray Leonard is 5'10". And so I thought, as I noticed that, I'm thinking, oh, that's really, and I've seen Sugar Ray Leonard. I sat by him at the NBA All-Star game in 1988 in Chicago, he and his son. And I mean, he's not a big guy, but he's certainly not, I mean, he's, so I thought that was how they were going to do that. And I thought they pulled that off, because Edgar Ramirez, you kind of look at his physique, he's kind of a little willowy, tall, a little taller. Whereas Roberto Duran was like a rock.
House.
Yeah. And I think that was kind of interesting, but it worked. It obviously worked. And who else has the swag, the look, the charm, and the charisma, but Usher. And I think for such a large part, I mean, for him at that particular time, he had some movie where he was like a bodyguard, and then he was like in She's All That. He played like the DJ, and it was like very small parts. So to see him come out and do that was really interesting. And I always like to see entertainers try to play athletes or act or something like that. I always find that really fun to see.
Yeah, that's one of the things about the I didn't know that was Usher, but he really nailed Sugar Ray, it
Yeah,
seemed.
he did a good job.
I watched the 30 for 30 ESPN doc
Yes.
on the No Moss fight, and I was watching that. I was like, wow, I could see how well those actors really portrayed their respective roles. It was really well done.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think, it was a cool move to have Robert De Niro in there because, you associate, when you think about boxing movies, somehow, because of Raging Bull, and he's been in
Right.
a few other boxing movies, that's always kind of stuck in your head.
Mhm.
And, because there's just something about that you always kind of bring to it. And from what I understood was Al Pacino was actually thought of. He was the first choice, I think, to play Ray Arcel.
Mhm.
And I
I
thought,
could definitely see him playing Ray Arcel.
yeah, and
Yeah.
I could have seen a younger Al Pacino playing Roberto Duran because he's
Oh,
short.
yeah.
Oh yeah,
If they
hell
were
yeah.
able to do that same kind of transformation that Robert De Niro was able to do
Yeah,
in Raging Bull, I think I mean, obviously, if you could go with time travel,
Right.
but I think because he has that quick mouth and the what do type of thing that Roberto Duran has, especially when he's pursuing
Oh, yeah.
pursuing his wife in the street when he first
I
meets
think you could have made him more likable too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Right? Like my thing about the Roberto Duran and watching this movie is I'm like, he's not a likable guy.
No.
I mean, like I'm watching him going, how did anybody put up with this? I mean, other than the fact that he could beat up 90% of the guys in the room.
When he was 8 years old.
Yeah.
When he was only 8.
No.
Why did
Well,
he put up with it?
well,
And
and
it's the way to get out of the ghetto, I guess.
yes. I think you find when you look into the history of many of these boxers, obviously, that was their only ticket. That was their only
Mhm.
win. And I think they did a really good job when you take such a long span of a person's life, like they did with Roberto Duran. Growing up, in the projects, and especially in when U.S. was U.S. the United States had occupied that territory at the time. So obviously he hated the United States. His father, who had abandoned him until he found out. He thought he was a U.S. soldier, which he was, but he was actually of Mexican descent. That was really interesting. I think he
Yeah.
pictured some blue-eyed, blonde-haired asshole that left him when, I mean, it was looked very much like himself. He was pissed off. And I think a lot of these people, because of their life experiences, it's due to that anger. It's due to that, fight. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I think you would find that in a lot of them, in their history.
Well, that's one of the things with Duran. It seemed like he fought when he was his best when he was angry, and it's almost like on the fight where he quit. He didn't have that anger anymore, and he had lost it there for that moment. And you bring up his dad. And the film tried to portray this. His hatred for the U.S. and he had it in his head that that's all it was. And when he saw his dad, that kind of flipped. It's like, wait a minute, what I've been told is not true, or my perceptions are wrong, and that kind of did a number on him. So it was interesting to see that it was just his anger. And I want to watch the documentary. Like Dave said, he's not a likable guy. It's like, holy crap. But yeah, he beat you up.
Money to the local charities and stuff.
Yes,
but he still wasn't likable. I mean, it was almost like he was trying to buy everyone's love. I could be wrong. Like I said, I'm judging this by strictly the movie and what very little I knew about the guy. Hell, I thought he was Cuban before I saw this movie.
Yeah.
I did. They always portrayed him as Cuban.
Right.
That's what I always heard. And then when I found out he was from Panama, I was like, wait a minute. Yeah, I vaguely remember somebody talking about him being from Panama, but I didn't remember that. It's just one of those things you just don't remember, don't think about.
Right. And I think it was just more of like a culture, his culture versus, the American culture, things like that. And, it is interesting. And I think a lot of times when as athletes ascend, obviously he had a huge ego to begin with. And he was probably told that from a young age because, he could do all of this. He knew where his power was. He used that power. He used that power probably over, I'm sure that the woman that that becomes his wife, or Felicitas, was not the first woman that he pursued like that in the street and expected that return. But, he always had a point to prove. And you're right. He tried to buy his life. And I think it was also because he felt that he probably deserved that. Because he loved me. And what's interesting is he named his son Robin after Robin Hood, because he felt that he was being Robin Hood. And he actually helped train Edgar, his sons helped train Edgar Ramirez in the process of, so that was kind of neat too, which is, I think is very,
I never knew that. Okay.
Edgar said, look, I'm not a fighter, but I can act. And Robin, I'm assuming he said, well, I'm an actor who can fight. So I can, and so it was fun to watch his children, train him. And,
very cool.
Because there is a style, and there's a style to that kind of fighting. And one of them was they showed him working out, and oh wow, that was something to watch. Watching him train, and he's his hair's long, and they have this music. A lot of it's a musical.
Right. It's a dance.
Yeah, and they show him doing that in his training, and a lot of that was in there. And to see him embrace that was really a neat. But you get that, which I thought was really interesting. So,
well, I remember watching Duran fight as a kid, and when he hit somebody, they felt it. I mean, you could see them stunned no matter where he hit them. It was like getting hit by a brick. I mean, these guys felt it.
Hands of Stone.
The name.
Hands of Stone was no joke. I mean, I'd never heard that term. Maybe that's what they always called him.
Yeah.
But I just remember watching him in a couple of fights, and even with that first fight, I vaguely remember watching the Sugar Ray fight when he went the first time he wins. I just remember thinking, there's no way Sugar Ray's winning this fight. They made it look a lot closer, I think, in the movie than it really was. Because Sugar Ray was not a guy to go toe-to-toe with somebody. He was a guy to strike, back out, and that was his strength. He was very fast. And if he could get in and pop you about 5 or 6 times and then jump back out, you're standing there stunned, he can jump back in. That's how I remember. Now I haven't watched any old fights, but that's what I remember.
He chose that tactic to go in flat-footed with him, like you said, toe-to-toe. And the interesting thing, the scoring of that in the movie, when it was revealed, it was incorrect. It still played out. I can't remember how it went, but it still did play out in Duran's favor.
Right.
But they made it seem like it was like this, but it was a little bit more into Roberto Duran's, and you could see that. But I don't, I don't think he took it. I don't know. I'm not going to say that Sugar Ray Leonard didn't take it seriously, but at that particular time, I did not know who Roberto Duran was. I didn't watch middleweight. I didn't watch, that weight class, or know much about that weight class. But I do remember the fight. I remember the shorts for some reason, the color. I remember that. I knew it was a big deal.
Yeah.
I knew it was a big deal to watch, so I did sit down and watch some of that.
Well, I only vaguely remember watching him as a kid because back in the old days, they used to have the fights on Saturday,
ABC.
Sports, and where the guy wipes out on the skis.
Wide World Sports, yep.
Yeah.
It was always every weekend they'd have boxing. So I just vaguely remember the guy. Why Sugar Ray chose him to fight is beyond me, because I don't think he was right at that level. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems to me that he kind of pulled him and went, I want to fight that guy, or I'm not sure what the reason was. It looks like in the movie he just walks in and insults Sugar Ray, and that's why they fight.
Yeah, but I think Don King might have had something to do with that, because he is, I don't know, he was obviously around at that time.
Yeah.
And he was in all of it. He had his hands in all of it. And I'm wondering if he, I don't know about that, but obviously as being the greatest fight promoter of all time, that was that it. So that was kind of interesting. But I also like the thought of Ellen Barkin playing Stephanie Arcel,
Yeah,
You
it
know what
took
I
me a
mean?
second to recognize her. Yeah.
Yes.
It took me a while. I was like, I'm watching the whole movie. It's like, who the hell is that? And it's like, oh my
Yeah.
God, yeah.
It's when
Yeah.
she grinned, when she did the lopsided grin, that Alan Arkin lopsided grin. I was like, that's who she is. You know?
Yeah, I mean, she sounded, if you saw the 30 for 30, you're like, yeah, I mean, they must have, well, this was done after the 30 for 30 too, so at least they
Yeah.
had that kind of footage in that particular case.
Well,
But
they did, and that's one of the things about De Niro. His look was perfect for Arcel. I mean, they
Mhm.
looked so much alike when seeing
yeah,
that, and that was one of the things. Even all of them did, and that was I'm still blown away that was Usher.
Yeah.
Wow.
you're saying you just figured that out now, or when you just went through it,
Uh,
or like,
I did just
oh,
now. Just
oh,
now, I did.
yeah, yeah. I thought that was wonderful. I thought that was great casting
Yeah.
in that particular case. And like I said, the problem when you do a biopic, if you're going to take that span, and this is probably my criticism of this movie, is that when you go that long of a span, it tends to be very choppy. You know
Yeah.
what
Yes.
I mean? Because you're trying to get, okay, this is what happened, so you understand. This is what happened. And in a boxing movie, and I think mostly this is because of what Rocky brought us, you want to see the training scene.
You need the
Mhm.
montage.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
The
And it
80s
was,
training montage, the
yeah.
hardworking scene. Yeah, you need that.
And this is the funny thing about the training scene. I get asked sometimes if I'm hanging out with my girlfriends or something, they talk about movies that made them cry. And they say, oh, terms of endearment, Steel
Mm.
Magnolias, which I had the honor to do on stage. But, they're all, and then it comes to my turn and I'm like, every training scene in every Rocky movie brings me to tears. I can't, I mean, and as a child, when I'm watching that, when that music, Bill Conti's,
Yeah.
orchestra starts with that music, I mean, it made the hair on my neck stand up. And I'm
Mhm.
watching this, and you have to have that. I mean, I taught myself to do almost everything that Sylvester Stallone did in that montage. I was so determined, I mean, I could do the one arm push ups, I could clap. I could do all of that. I ate the raw egg. I mean,
Oh.
my brother dared me. My brother dared
So
me, and
you had to do it.
Of
yeah,
course.
my dad was standing there. Scott, you think I'm not going to tell my dad
Right.
no? He's going to test my toughness. Oh no, no. When you're the littlest, yeah, you know.
Yeah.
So all of that, but that I wanted to see more of that. You know what I mean? But I also
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's unfair too to expect sometimes though, because that does belong to Rocky. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? I think that those scenes belong to that franchise, but they did a good job. They showed him jump roping, and I loved watching them jump rope. That was always one of my favorite activities too. I mean,
I
how did,
cannot jump rope.
oh, I I I could. I love to jump rope.
My face, and then I'll be tied up and hog tied. Like, how the hell is this?
Well, the hard one when he would do the jump and he'd squat down on the floor and then
Yeah.
Right.
swing. I could do the crisscross and the swing, but I mean, no way. I'd land on my ass if I tried. Especially now, I could just be like, well, now forget it. I can barely get down the stairs. Yeah, but back in my day, I could. That would have been that would have been fairly easy to do. Yeah, not now. No, but and the same thing with the fights. The fights were kind of choppy. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? And like I said, it's they're like snap snap. Because it's not. This story wasn't about it was about the fight. It was about no mas, uno mas, and but they didn't go into the third fight.
Right.
But which is another story in itself. But
Mhm.
it's about his story, and to understand why he was the way he was and his place in the boxing world, because he has
Mhm.
a huge place in the
Mhm.
history of boxing, and so does Sugar Ray Leonard, obviously. I mean, this story, it's the most it really, as far as to me, outside of course, every Ali fight was a story, with Sonny Liston, George Foreman or Frazier. There's
Right.
always a story with him, but this was just like another nice, or interesting, not nice, but
Who,
part of the history.
I'm sorry. Who was the white guy that Ali fought? Guy could not fight for anything,
Jerry
but he
Cooney?
could not get knocked down.
I think his name was Jerry. It might have been Jerry Cooney.
Cooney.
Yeah,
Cooney, that's it.
yeah, yeah,
I could not remember the guy. I just remember watching that fight for, what was it, 15 rounds at the time? Cooney was basically a punching bag and would not go down. And Ali was it Ali or Foreman? Somebody was just hitting him with everything they had. And that would be a great movie for Clooney.
To watch some guy get pummeled for 15 rounds.
But the thing is, the guy would not go down. Like,
Right.
why isn't this guy falling? Like,
yeah,
any other human being would have been in the hospital.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
Cooney, at the end of the fight, is like, can we have a rematch? And they're like, no. You just got your ass beat for 15 rounds.
We don't have time.
You took a punch. We don't think you
Not enough
can
time.
at once.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's such a great. Like I said, it's a wonderful history.
Yeah.
And the thing I did not know, I do remember when they tried to fight, when they had in '89, which, okay, Roberto Duran was 5 years older than Sugar Ray Leonard, and I mean
That's a
those
lot of time.
really, that is, and in boxing, especially in boxing years, I kind of think there's a window, and I'm glad that they didn't try and go into that, because the movie does border on being a tad too long.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? It treads lightly on that.
Is that when Sugar Ray wanted to use the boxing gloves without the thumbs?
I think that might have been an Ali fight, if I'm not mistaken, but I'm not sure. I could be wrong.
Boxers not wanting to use thumbs,
Oh, I hear what you're saying. Okay, I don't know.
and whoever he was fighting was like, no. like the thumbs went inside the boxing gloves or something.
Okay.
They tried it like with a couple of fights years ago, and it just
Okay.
like nobody could do it. Everybody's like, no, we don't. And it had to do with somebody's retina. Somebody had a torn retina. I thought it was Sugar Ray Leonard.
Okay.
I could be wrong.
It might have been one of the Hagler or
Yeah, it could be.
Thomas Hearns. They call them the Fab Four. Marvin Hagler.
Hearns was a monster. Oh,
Yeah.
God, heaven, that guy was a monster in the ring.
Yeah. And the funny thing too about this movie is it didn't also expand on their relationship, because they, if you saw the No Mas, the 30 for 30,
Mhm.
Yeah.
they made it feel like they never saw each other ever since that last fight, and that they never had a conversation
Right.
about it. And and I was doing some research. Well, here's just picture them here, and this particular time. That was so, I mean, obviously it was, they had to be orchestrated, but it was kind of interesting how that worked. And
Yeah, it was
of
at
course,
the end of the movie. I mean, they showed that Sugar Ray and Roberto had become good friends and had spent a lot of time together. Then I watched the 30 for 30, and it was like, this is odd, because it's the way it was framed was they had never seen each other. He flew down to Panama, and then that was it. And it's like,
yeah.
seeing that documentary though, actually helped me appreciate the movie more. And watching that, I gained more respect or more empathy for Duran. And a lot of it was just mainly when Sugar Ray was asking, why did you stop the fight? Why did you stop it? And then he gave his standard answer of hot steak or coffee and water in my stomach. That is like, okay. And then Sugar Ray said, at that point, I saw that he's struggling with something. I'm not gonna push. I'm just gonna respect it and move on. And they had a mutual respect right there, and it was kind of touching. I still think Duran was an ass, but I had to gain some empathy for him on that, and it made me appreciate the movie more. I've never had, I won't say never, but I started after I watched this movie, I did not like it at all. I had major issues with it. And when the more time passed, and then I watched the documentary, it's like, this is a pretty damn good movie. It did a really good job of portraying what was going on, and it was it was actually like I said, kind of touching that there was a human part to it, but it was really hard to get past that gruff exterior of Duran.
Right.
And that was the only problem I really had. It's like, here's your main character. I think we all go into movies looking for an underdog, looking for somebody to work their way up. And it's like, while he did that, I didn't care because he was a jerk. You know, he was hard to root for.
A huge ego, which,
Yes.
you know, really many professional athletes have. We know this. And I mean, and so did Sugar Ray Leonard. I mean, he wasn't really into either, but, you know, he was Roberto Duran had the weight of a country on his shoulders. Do you know what I mean? And you know, we have here, even at that time, you know, we've had just came back from the Olympics where he was, you know, he's the golden boy and all this kind of stuff. And you know, he was an Olympic champion. What did they have in Panama? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, Sugar Ray Leonard, he got a bloody nose, but you know, Roberto Duran had the weight of the country on his shoulders. And when the second one came around, it was really sad. You see that no one was there to really receive him. And you know, this is a typical rags to riches, you know, story, you know, that does happen many times. I just, you know, like I said, there's just such a political undertone when you think about what Panama and the country, what that meant to the country to have that. You know, and you know, it's the same thing. You know, I kind of liken a little bit of that to Manny Pacquiao. You know, he has, you know, as being a representative of the Philippines, you know, that was a
lot of pressure.
Yeah, it is. It is, especially if you don't have that much to focus on or to bring out of your country, and especially at that particular time.
Well, that's what they showed in the movie is all the citizens of Panama. I mean, they all just attached everything to Duran, and that was a huge weight for him to have it. So when he became their champion, it reflected, I'm sure a lot of people saw that in themselves and their country, and there was a lot of pride, and that's why the No Mas fight happened. And it just, man, they turned on him. They were hurt, and it was ugly. And in watching that documentary, he said even today people holler at him and try and, you know, give him grief over it, even though he has completely redeemed himself and went on to continue to win. And and that's what, you know, that movie was in some cases too long, but in others it would have been nice to see a little bit more of his redemption per se.
Right. And the funny thing is he still denies saying No Mas.
Right.
He said,
but if you watch that fight, you can see him saying it.
Well, he said no sigo, which means I don't want to go on. And then he said Howard Cosell said no mas. So and that could be a possibility. Howard Cosell knew how to make a situation dramatic. He knew how to do that. So I wouldn't think that would make sense, you know. But he's saying no mas, but is there really a difference between no sigo and
Does it really matter at this point? Was it a steak or some hot water? I mean, it doesn't matter.
Well, and he had such a short, I didn't realize that the first fight, I believe, was in June.
Yeah, there wasn't much time.
Yeah, and so he went back to New York to party. And, you know, which I probably done the same thing too, you know. I mean, if I would have had that opportunity, you know, you have people telling you yes this, yes that, when all your life they've told you no.
Right.
You know, and I, you know, so for that to happen, he wasn't in shape. That isn't a lot of time to get ready for and to recover from a heavy from professional boxing match. You know, they go through so much and it takes so much time.
Well, and Sugar Ray knew that. I think that's why he pushed for that fight, because he knew he was going to do that and be out of shape.
Yeah.
So it was very tactical.
And Sugar Ray looks like he could still go now. He looks fantastic. And you know, at the beginning of that 30 for 30, I was shocked that was Roberto Duran. I thought it was like a trainer. And
Yeah.
then, oh, this little old man.
Yeah.
Mhm.
He's
You know? Oh.
and
yeah.
Sugar Ray looks like he can step in the ring right now. And it's
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. And it's so as far as that like the movie goes, I think it was a risky move to put out there because there is so much in it and it goes through such a long amount of time. And that's, the main criticism has been with that too choppy.
Yeah.
It was a good effort, but too choppy. And it is, you're looking here, you're looking there, and you didn't really get a chance to think, let the story sink in as you do.
I went in expecting not to like the movie at all. But I do like it. I like a lot of things. I'm not a big De Niro fan to begin with. He was good in the movie, but for me, he was De Niro. But you put De Niro in a movie with the mob, and it's like you can't get it playing De Niro.
Yeah, you give it good quotes,
Yeah.
Yeah. But he played the part well. I think Alan.
I didn't know he was in there.
What? Alan Arkin, come on, just ring the bell. Alan Arkin and him had really good chemistry. I mean, I bought it instantly. I did like the movie. As much as I expected to really dislike it, my big criticism was the America bad and everybody else good.
Yeah.
The handedness of it. I think I could be wrong. I've never been in Panama. I don't know what it was like then at that point. But I don't know. It just seemed really heavy-handed.
It seemed heavy-handed to me as well.
Yeah.
I understand why it was there because that is obviously as Holly, as you had mentioned, he had the weight of Panama on him, and that was very there.
With Holly saying that, now it makes sense.
Yeah.
But to just watch that movie, I'm sitting there like, that's really, really heavy. And I know crap happened down there. I know it was bad for a lot of people on both sides. I mean, you had Americans wanting to get out. You had Panamanians wanting them to leave. You had Panamanians wanting them to stay. You had Americans wanting them to stay. It was a nasty situation. But and it didn't dawn on me until what you said about him having the weight of Panama and the country on his shoulders.
Well, this director is also Venezuelan, and so he has a lot of his movies are of and if I'm not I was reading up a little bit about him, but he does have political undertones in his movie, and they say the movie was well received at Cannes. And it got a good, but a lot of his movies, I had never heard of him myself or anything. So I did some research, and he, so maybe that could be another reason. Maybe that's the tone he takes in his movies, which every director has a tone. There's a tone, and and that's fine. And I get that. I get that too. And is it the best boxing movie ever? No, it's not. But it's I think it was underrated. I really do. I think it was
because I had never heard of it.
Yeah.
I've never heard of the movie.
Yeah, I was when I saw it, I was very excited because I wanted to see how this story was presented. Yeah. And like I said, outside of baseball, you just don't find a sport as rich. And I also think you don't have as many boxers, so it's easy to find those stories, I think, in that respect. So I just think that it was a really a good film. Like I said, not the best, but I sure enjoyed learning more about that.
The cat that they had playing Roberto, I mean, he kind of looked like him when he was younger, but the minute he got those sideburns on, I was like, I was like, that's the guy. That he just became Roberto Duran.
Yeah. Well, he hung out. When the movie filmed, he said the first thing he did was he went down to his bar, and he has a bar in Panama that he owns where he loves to sing, and he loves to sing and dance. And he said he got down. He said they got wasted, and they just kind of talked and kind of soak up his vibe.
Right.
also, I think that was probably the only way you could probably loosen up Roberto Duran.
Right,
You know what I
right.
mean? To
Yeah.
get into who he is as a persona, which I think is, brilliant move. Usher kind of did his thing first, and then brought Sugar Ray Leonard in, saying, "Is this right? What do you think?" But
Right.
Edgar went in there and just wanted, just tried to absorb him right away. And I would think that Roberto Duran would be like, "Hey, I've got this, handsome actor playing me in a movie.
Yeah,
Bring it on. My movie. It's not called Sugar Ray Leonard. It's called,
Right.
Stone. This is about me." And so I think he probably was very welcome to that, and for him to experience his culture.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that would make sense. That would
Yeah.
totally make sense, especially for the way Durant. That's how I would be. If a movie was being made about me, and it was a positive movie,
Right.
and I got to read the script, and I seen, oh, they're doing good by me. Come on in, kid. I'll talk to
Yeah.
you. I will tell
Exactly.
you the glory of
Yeah.
me.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I think that was good, and also the fact that they weren't sending in an American actor.
Right.
Do you know what I
Yes.
mean? I think he might have been like, who else you got out there?
Yeah, I
Right.
think, and given everything, I mean, regardless, I would imagine that would have been, I guess, very off-putting, especially to Duran. But yeah, they couldn't have done that.
Well,
Yeah.
Hollywood,
Well,
they did that. They did the gods of Egypt, and they were all white. It's like, what?
yeah, yeah.
Point taken.
Who are all the brown people? No, they're
There
no.
have been many liberties in the movies with things like that. So
Yeah, it's like, no, I'm sorry. These are the gods of Egypt.
Oh, we have no Hispanic actors. Let's bring in some white guy. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
true.
bring in the white guy. Wait, what?
Yeah.
Tulsa's not a white god.
Yeah, Tom Cruise is playing Malcolm X next. Yes. So,
Yeah, leave it to Hollywood. I wouldn't be shocked.
right.
I wouldn't be shocked. Why is he jumping from a plane? It's in his contract, kid. It's in his contract.
must fly through the air in each.
Yes.
He's got to blow something up.
Must hang from the side of a building. Hold on to a building for 5 hours and
Right.
Right.
hang over a rope somewhere.
Don't give Hollywood any more ideas.
Yeah, God no. God no. Oh,
Right.
horrible.
No, but that's pretty much, there's another movie I was interested that I hadn't seen in a boxing movie was Southpaw.
I have not seen that either.
Yeah, with Jake Gyllenhaal, and when I was reading some of the critiques, that
I've never even heard of this one.
yeah, Jake Gyllenhaal and Rachel McAdams, and I didn't see that, but like I said, that's not that's not a biopic.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I do prefer the biopic. I mean, like I said, whether it be about sports or rock and roll, I'd rather see. I like the true stories.
Mhm.
Well, my personal favorite fight movie is Any Which Way You Can with Clint Eastwood. I think it's very telling. Every man should own a monkey.
Right turn, Clyde.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's good. That's good.
Not quite the same vibe.
Yeah. It's something different.
I mean, yeah, there's some boxing in there. Oh, and main event. Don't forget that the main
Main
event.
event was good. Yes, I did like main event.
Yeah, I just think I like the song.
Yeah.
About it.
That's just it. There have been, I guess when you think boxing movies, as we mentioned earlier, you can't think boxing without Rocky and what Stallone has brought to this genre with the amazing fights, the cinematography, just the soundtrack, especially during the training montage. So which is your favorite montage, Holly?
Oh, always the first one.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
The first, always. I just, because they showed him first what he tried to do. We tried to run. He couldn't run. He wasn't in shape.
Right.
But he was, first of all, talk about silent times. He was running in Chuck Taylors.
Oh,
You
yes, he
can't
was. Oh my God.
You cannot
can't run.
run in Chuck Taylors. those I played in those. My
They
dad played
hurt.
in those. Yeah, I mean, it's like running out a book. There's nothing in there.
Yeah.
Right.
My feet are jacked up, and I'm like, and now that I think about it, he's running in Chuck Taylor's. But always the first one, because that was
Yeah.
the first time I'd heard that music, and
Yeah.
it wasn't just that one. Gonna fly now, which but it was the going the distance
Yeah.
that they used during the fight. During the fight, I
Mhm.
used that. I was a competitive gymnast as a child, and I used that as one of my floor exercise routines. And I had a small move. I was just supposed to do a back handspring, but once that I was 10, and once that music, I took off. I hold up, and I did like a back layout. My hands didn't touch the ground. I was flying. That music just, and everyone who's known me since that age has known that has always been, kind of, from my athletic standpoint. I have my athletic standpoint, my theatrical standpoint, or my musical standpoint. That was always my go-to. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? And you just can't. And the other training montages were great. The Eye of the Tiger was wonderful. That
Oh,
one was
yeah.
good. And even Robert Well, that wasn't really a training montage, but when you get
No, but that's
that,
such a great song for that, even though it has absolutely nothing to do. I think it's about a divorce.
yeah. Oh, No Easy Way Out, Robert
Yeah,
Redford's one.
yeah.
Yeah, but that was so powerful, and
It's a great tune, but what?
perspective, yeah, it is. It was a great tune, but it wasn't a training montage. But it was
Right.
still, it's still that powerful, that thing. You've got to have that in there, and they did okay with this, but that wasn't the focus.
Right.
Yeah.
To pull that music out, it just wouldn't be the same. You know what I mean?
Right.
And but for me, Rocky's always been a personal, just the whole franchise. And I
Mhm.
have to say, I've been pretty pleased with the Creed franchise too.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I think, I it was it's interesting because, you can overdo something, but I think they've done a great job. And I think Michael B. Jordan, he's such a fantastic actor. And I think he's really brought a great, I mean, he did a terrific,
Right.
he's doing a terrific job
Mm.
in that. And I couldn't think of anyone that would be better to play him at this point. But another funny story I learned in my research with this is that Sugar Ray Leonard did fight Floyd Mayweather's father and trained with him. Yes, Floyd Mayweather Jr.
Interesting.
Yeah, which I
Really?
think is yeah. So I found that interesting too. So it's there professional sports in Hollywood. There's there, there's a similarity. There's a
Right.
lot in that,
Yeah.
and I've learned that in my life growing up the way that I have, and the things that I've seen, and the way things are done.
Mhm.
There's a lot of performance in it, and but it's very interesting, and how movies about sports are, and think about this too. Rock and roll biopics, rock and roll
Yeah.
movies. It follows the same formula.
No, yeah.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Do lesson learned.
Right.
Which,
Yeah.
they're always
Went up, we failed, we had to come back.
yeah. But
There's
there's
always
some.
the working your way up, failing, and then going back up.
But in between, you're going to see some awesome performances. You're going to
Yeah.
see what I mean.
Right.
Yeah. So that's pretty interesting. But yeah, either of those. So whatever you want to do, a movie about rock and roll, music, I'm your girl. Sports. Well, I've
Cool.
done my sports things, but yeah, I could. How much time do we have?
Right. Right.
Yeah. So what's let's start with David. What's your thoughts on this movie? Recommend?
I
Not?
do recommend the movie. Like I said, initially hearing the political hard hittingness of it kind of annoyed me, but after listening to Holly and realizing there's a reason for it, it makes total sense. Porto Duran, not a likable fella, at least in my opinion. People around him may love him to death
Yeah.
and just think he's, a god. But from this movie, if it was really close to actuality, I I don't see a whole lot of likableness about him, but it is a good movie. It's a pretty good movie. I'd recommend it. I'd say, yeah, it's a watcher. It is a watcher.
Holly?
Oh, absolutely. If that's your thing, because I've recommended this to my husband about 80 times.
He still hasn't watched.
No. And I can't get him to watch the No Mas, the 30 for 30. And I don't know why. We watch all of them. And for some reason, I can't get him interested in that one. Well, he's busy, but, I saw Hands of Stone and No Mas on an airplane.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I had 2 separate flights within a year of each other. And the last flight, my brother and I were talking about Roberto Duran at the fight. And oddly enough, when I got on the plane, there was a selection of 30 for 30. And there was the Namas. So I called him, like, you're not going to believe this. You got to watch.
That's funny.
I think it's one of the best 30 for 30s, despite the little theatrics at the end of them in the ring talking.
Yeah.
But it was still a very, yeah. But back to the movie, yes, definitely. If you like boxing movies, you got to see it.
All right, I will agree with that. As I said earlier, I went into this movie not knowing really much about Duran or that fight. I didn't like the movie by the time it was done, and a lot of it didn't have to do with the content. It was more of the way it was shot, the choppiness, the scenes that I felt did not do any service. Ray Arcel's adoptive daughter, that could have all just been cut. It was just, I think it went along with the director might have been aiming for a theme of redemption from everybody. You had Duran's father show up and apologize. You had Ray Arcel taking care of his daughter finally, and then Duran stepping back in the ring for Panama. And so it might have been where he was going with it, but overall, I really liked it, and knowing the history behind it actually helped me like it. So I definitely give it a recommend.
Thanks for tuning in to our special episode of Old Ass Movie Reviews. Be sure and catch us next week when we review The Mad Men of Mandoras.